Hi guys, since chapter 17 and 18 are so similar, I'm just going to cover them in one quick video for you. Hopefully it's quick. Chapter 17 is kind of the what, and chapter 18 is kind of the how. So 17 is all the specific organs. On the first couple of pages you'll see all of the endocrine organs listed, the different ways the endocrine system works through neurotransmitters, paracrine, merocrine, or autocrine, and endocrine inputs. You'll see the different lists of how specific hormones bind and how they function. In other words, they don't float around in your body for forever. They have what's called half-life, etc., all explained for you on those pages. Then there's the difference between water-soluble and lipid-soluble hormones, how they function differently, how they bind to the cells, and then you get into the general chemistry between around these specific hormones. And so you see those diagrams there. I'm not going to throw a picture of a hormone at you and ask you to identify what it is, but you should understand how each of those types of hormones are different. You see different patterns of hormone secretion on page 576. 577 is showing you the basics of how endocrine system works, the basics of the feedback system, low blood calcium, high blood calcium, calcitonin, and PTH, etc. Then you get, between 578 and 579, you're seeing the feedback systems, how those hormone release is controlled, how that hormone release is controlled, how the feedback loops between the pituitary and the target organs, and then, or the target cells, and then the feedback loop back up to the pituitary to say, hey, there's been this hormone that's been released, we don't need to continue releasing it, in the form of negative feedback. Then positive feedback, of course, is a little different. So it's important to understand those feedback loops there that are diagrammed for you. There's also tissue specificity and cell specificity. You can shoot all of the hormones you want at particular cells, but unless they have the receptors for that hormone, it's not going to do anything. You have what's called downregulation and upregulation. It's important to understand what those are and how those work, how the different receptors work, the nuclear receptors and the membrane receptors, and that's diagrammed out for you in 583 and 584. Then you get the activation of G proteins and the cascade reactions that occur on page 585. It's kind of like dominoes. That hormone binds, and then there's this whole systematic domino effect that occurs. There's different membrane-bound receptors that you need to understand, and then the role of ion channels. A lot of what hormones do is it tells cells to kind of activate and respond, or it tells cells to shut off. So in activating and responding, it's doing basically what a nerve cell or muscle cell does. It's depolarizing, it's letting ions in, it's changing its chemistry to allow these new ions in and allow new information to flow through it. And so that is kind of the basics of how hormones work in the body. Then in chapter 18, we get into the specific glands. So again, it was kind of the what, and what is the endocrine system, what are all of these things, and now we're going to look at how these things play an actual role in what they do. We'll cover the pituitary and hypothalamus first, and that's diagrammed for you on page 596. 597, showing you the development of the pituitary. It plays a huge role in development, both in utero and then obviously throughout our entire life with all of the hormones that it releases. It's important to understand the difference between anterior and posterior. It's important to know the hormones that are associated with the anterior compared to the hormones that are associated with the posterior. So all of those are important to understand. There are specific hormones related to the hypothalamus, and that is diagrammed on 598. And the different patterns of secretion for the posterior pituitary and anterior pituitary are on those pages as well. You get the ADH, the control of ADH secretion and the impact on the kidneys. Next semester you'll cover kidneys and the urinary system, but that ADH plays a humongous role in how concentrated your urine is, so it's important to understand how that works. The next page is oxytocin. Oxytocin plays a huge role in uterine contractions and what's called milk letdown, actually ejecting the milk from the mammary glands. So it's important to understand how oxytocin is released in the feedback mechanism there, as well as growth hormone, the roles of growth hormone, how that is controlled and regulated as well. Then you get into the thyroid, the role of the thyroid glands, the different types of hormones that are released from the thyroid. It's not just thyroid hormones, there's also calcitonin, which plays a role in calcium balance in our body. We talked a little bit about that earlier in the semester with bone anatomy. How those thyroid hormones are produced, the role of iodine in thyroid hormone production, all important to understand, and of course how it is regulated through the TRH being released from the hypothalamus, telling the pituitary to release TSH, which then tells the thyroid to release thyroid. So there's this whole cascading feedback loop, and it's important to understand all of those steps. Then the parathyroid gland releasing PTH and the role of PTH, and the overall homeostasis of blood calcium is diagrammed on 613. If you didn't get it before, maybe you'll get it now, kind of back to haunt you or revisit you. And then you have the hormones for the adrenal glands, the adrenal medulla secretions, and those the roles that those play. Then with cortical hormones. Then we get to the pancreas and the role of glucagon and insulin with digestion. We'll look at that more closely next semester, but it's important to understand how those hormones are regulated, the feedback loops. Finally, there is a regulatory flow chart showing you homeostasis on page 623, explaining the relationship between insulin and glucagon. Very important to understand how that works, and the idea that it's not just the pancreas that's affected here. Sorry, my foot's falling asleep. It's not just the pancreas that's going to be affected. There are several organs that are affected when insulin and glucagon are secreted. So all of that is important. You get the differences in nutrient and hormone regulation before a meal and after a meal, basically what your body is doing to prepare for a meal, or what your body's doing to kind of pull you through until the next meal, and the specific hormones of the reproductive system. That's just charted out for you, because when we actually cover the reproductive system next semester, you'll see all of those in action. The pineal gland and the pineal secretions, namely melatonin, which is helping with sleep-wake cycles. You might recall the pineal gland on the brain. And then finally, the effects of aging on the endocrine system. It has some particular organs are more susceptible than others. Just like everything, it all starts to slow down, and some of the parts might not work as they used to. Please let me know if you guys have any questions, and have a great day.